Welcome back to the List Building Lifestyle. I'm your host, Igor. And today I want to share with you an interview that I've done on someone else's podcast about why should every author write a book. Now, most authors think that as soon as they launch their book, they're going to be rich and famous. The idea that, just putting a book out there alone is good enough, I don't buy that. I simply don't. There are tons of authors on Amazon and Barnes and Noble who sell less than 10 books a year. On average, to be a successful self-help author, you're looking at selling about 100 books a year. Now, for me, that's not good enough. For me, if you want to have your book spread your message, if you want to have a true impact, you probably want to be selling thousands of books per year, not hundreds of them, and definitely not dozens of them. And for me, my list and email marketing have been instrumental when it comes to selling more books. Now, on one hand, of course, the list has been helping the book, but also the book has been helping the list. So they sort of feed on each other. But what's important is that the list provided the initial launch pad for my book to make it into an instant bestseller. In this interview, I touch upon why every author should have an email list, and preferably why every author who hasn't published a book yet should start building a list right now before they even started writing their book. Because as soon as they're ready to send their message into the world, having a launchpad like a list will be extremely beneficial. That's how you make your book into an instant bestseller. I became an overnight bestseller in 3 Amazon categories simply thanks to announcing my book to my list. My buddy Mike Martin just the other day was sharing with me how he sold 3,000 copies of his book just by having his audience, his list, support him during the book launch. There's very few things that are better than having an email list when you decide to become an author. And whether you are an author right now, whether you're planning to become one, or whether you're not planning to become one, I think what you will find is this episode will open your eyes just to how big of an impact having an email list can have on your entire business, whether you've got a product or a service, whether you're an affiliate marketer, or whether you're launching a content piece like a book, a blog, or a podcast. So with that said, now you know what this episode is going to be about. Now you know whether you want to listen to it. And if so, it's time to take it away. Enjoy. I'm Igor, and this is the List Building Lifestyle, the podcast for anyone who wants to build a wildly profitable email list working from home. If you'd like to make 6 figures, travel the world, and help people improve their lives in the process, this podcast is for you. I also invite you to claim a free copy of my best-selling book, The List Building Lifestyle: Confessions of an Email Millionaire, at igorsbook.com. Get the free book plus $3,000 bonus package that includes my best capture page templates, email swipe files, and traffic blueprints. Visit www.igorsbook.com for details. And now, it's time to claim your list building lifestyle.
Igor, welcome to the show.
Well, great to be here. I appreciate you hosting me, and I look forward to our chat.
Yeah. So what I found really interesting about your book, because authors who sometimes get immersed in this idea of their book as their journey, they forget that the most important part of writing a book is the person on the other end, which is building an audience. And I thought your book did a really great job of kind of like unpacking your journey of being an entrepreneur, creating a lifestyle around building an email list. And I really want to talk about it because I really think this conversation about email not being dead still needs to happen, in particular for authors. So let's just give them a peek into your book. I hope they read it. We'll list in the show notes. But why did you choose this topic as a way to kind of focus your attention now?
Well, there's 2 reasons. The first reason being is that email changed my life. I mean, I made pretty much all my money using email marketing, and I still do to this day. And I don't feel that, I mean, at least my bank account isn't showing any signs of email stopping because the company that I run has been growing usually every couple of years, right? So usually we see an increase in revenue, like a substantial one, every 2 years or so. Now, the other reason is very simple. The book is just a very good way to spread an idea, because you can put up a YouTube video or You can run a podcast and that's great. But when you put an idea into a book, people look at it differently. People take it seriously. And then as a result, of course, they take you seriously because you had, the balls to publish a book. So, that kind of opens more doors. It increases your Q factor and overall helps you get the message across that is really important to you and your cause.
Right. And I think what you said there is that it increases your Q factor. It makes you more authoritative. And in the days and age of attention, any way you can make sure that you're the one that people should pay attention to is important. So, the world will catch up to what podcasts are, but the truth is so many people still don't know what they are. Blogs, even though we now use the internet widely, still don't gain the same authority as being an author. A book says, I spent time thinking about this. Here's my message. And it's a very traditional concept. So most people find it just comes with authority. Would you agree?
I agree absolutely. Especially since I started with one of the methods that I tried initially to make money online and to spread my message, which was a message of financial prosperity, because I was born in Ukraine, and throughout my life, my family went mostly through just downs, financial downs all the time. And so I've used the internet to become prosperous, to make money, to become wealthy, to help my friends become wealthy, to improve the lives of the people around me. And, I started out as one of the ways to spread this message. I chose blogging, and I blogged for 8 months nonstop. And the amount of content I wrote, to be honest with you, probably could fill 10 books, because every day, I'm not kidding, every single day I wrote at least 700 to 1,000 words. An average book is about 32,000 words. So if you multiply 1,000 by 30 days by 8 months, you can see, I wrote 8 books or so. However, I haven't had a single inch of impact with my work. The most I've had as far as impact is concerned, I made a few sales, with some affiliate marketing, but, my message wasn't heard. My ideas did not spread. So eventually, at some point, I started putting my ideas into paid products on websites like ClickBank and other websites where you could sell information products. And that helped, right? I used paid advertising that helped more. But all throughout the years, there was one media, which, I personally always admired, right? And people who kind of participated in that media were always on a pedestal for me personally. It was books, right? So when I think of authors, I think of people like, say, Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy and, a bunch of people who are recognizable and are considered to be gurus or authorities in their space. So eventually, if you're considering to write a book, if you've been failing to launch your book up until this point, I think a very good thing to remember is that none of the authors that you now admire and respect and want to be more like have started out as authorities. Most of them became authorities as a result of publishing their books. But most of us think that it's the other way around, where you have to accomplish something before you can write a book. In my opinion, you would typically accomplish something as a result of writing a book.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about some of your early missteps in entrepreneurship, and we'll talk about how that also can relate to early missteps in writing a book or sharing a message.
Sure. The thing you just mentioned, asking for permission or waiting for permission to write a book or publish any kind of content, I think it's one of the most common reasons for failure especially online, where, we want to become thought leaders and just in general leaders to tribe, and we just wait for something to happen as if there's a rites of passage of some kind that's supposed to make us into authorities and give us permission right. to go charge people for the help we want to provide them, or go just publish an interesting piece of information and make an impact that information, or, whatever. For example, you have a TED Talk, right? So some people would look at your TED Talk and think, oh, wow, so he's an authority because, he's now has a TED Talk, and that's awesome. And for example, my friend, Dr. Sean Stevenson, who also has a TED Talk, and as well as a bunch of other viral videos that I think collected over 25 million views, that helps at becoming authority. But you really don't make any impact until and unless you put yourself out there like that. As far as myself, I've had 3.5 years worth of failures where I think I became an expert at my craft as a result of just trying everything that does not work.
Right. Let's talk about a little bit about this notion as we're into marketing, because so many authors they really want their message to be shared, but then they cringe at the word marketer or marketing, and
And
they and
selling.
selling. Oh my gosh, they're just no. If it's good, they'll sell. I'm like, that's a wonderful dream, but it's not true. So you got to shake that loose. If you're listening and you're author, you think I'll write a good book and then it'll sell if it's good. No, best-selling books are the best sold books, best marketed books, and people know about them. They don't necessarily have to be the best written books. And that's really hard sometimes for people to hear who are literary critics. But what I want people to hear is, as you're doing this, because you're writing this book, you're sharing this book to the world. It's a topic, about email marketing. So obviously that's the context. But what would you say to the author who says, I just don't want to do any marketing?
Well, I'd remind them the story behind Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Pretty sure pretty much everybody who wants to be an author is familiar with Robert Kiyosaki and his, just enormous success. Well, in his book that he co-authored with Donald Trump, he tells the story of how he self-published it because he got rejected by 24 different publishers. And that, when he self-published it, it wasn't not a bestseller, not by any means. However, what happened was that his book was picked up by, I think, if I'm correct, I think it's Amway or one of their leaders or something like that. So it's an MLM organization, and it just spread throughout the organization. And as a result, somehow it ends up on Oprah's desk. And then, Robert was at the time on vacation in some distant location, no phone, nothing. When he comes back, there's like a message from Oprah's people. He goes on Oprah, they talk about the book, the lights go off, the camera shuts down. Oprah turns around, on this couch that she usually sits on. She turns to Robert and she says, "You're welcome. I just sold 1 million copies of your book." So you can, here's this great book that changed many, many lives, my own including. And the whole process of it becoming a bestseller had a lot to do with the way it was sold and promoted rather than with it being a good book, because publishers couldn't really recognize it. And there's another great forgotten story where you had two different authors come to publishing houses back in the 1930s with the same book. Okay, same exact book, different title and different author. Okay, and basically it was one author with two different names, right? So they just mailed the book in, and the contents of the book was exactly the same. There was no difference in the table of contents, in the words written, just the title was different slightly and the author was different. So one book got rejected every single time. The other got accepted in every single publishing house. And the reason is because the one that got accepted was written supposedly by this famous author, that this guy was actually a famous author. And the other one was just a created pen name that no one knew. So this tells you that a book can be published just because it's been published by somebody famous. Right. For example, if, Donald Trump, right? So he's a controversial guy. So imagine he's publishing another book. It's going to be accepted. If Tim Ferriss says, okay, I'm going to write a book about gardening, trust me, someone's going to want to, publish it. So marketing has a lot to do with how your book is going to sell. And, if marketing had nothing to do with it, then most published authors would probably be selling thousands upon thousands of copies on Amazon, which they do not.
Wonderful. So let's talk about that. So how did you choose your niche for your book?
Well, for me, it was simple. I have a huge advantage over most authors because I had a market going in. So I became, I was profitable with my business way before I decided to write a book because, and to be quite honest with you, the very reason why I procrastinated about writing a book for so many years is because I didn't feel I was qualified. Like, why would anyone listen to me kind of thing, right? Which is this imposter syndrome that's a part of all of us, I think. I never met anyone who doesn't have that. So when it comes to books, I always felt you have to be like the chosen one to write a book. Until I started hanging out with some authors and I realized, oh, wait a second, they're like just as dysfunctional as I am. So
right. maybe that's the qualification, maybe.
Yeah. So going in, I knew who my market is, because I've been in this business of helping people make money online, helping people build email lists, helping people promote their online businesses, services, information products, etc. for such a long time. So I had my ideal customer avatar down to a T. And, the amount of time I spent on just fine tuning this avatar, well, just a lot of time. So by the time I sat down to write a book, It wasn't a challenge. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I knew exactly who I was talking to, and I knew exactly how to deliver the message because of I had many, many years of experience delivering that message to different crowds. What I can suggest to you is you probably have a much easier time writing your book if you sit down, come up with your, ideal customer avatar, and then pretend you're talking to them on the phone. Literally, as they just called you up and asked you that big question that's on their mind. And let's pretend you spend the next 60 minutes on the phone with them, giving them all the know-how, the details, or telling them your story, whatever that is. So if you pretend that's what you're doing, but only in writing, or you can just record yourself do it and then just transcribe it, that's like 80% of your book. The rest, you just got to format it, clean it up a little bit, maybe enhance some stories over here, reduce some clutter over there, cut the fat, and that's your book. From there, now you have to, publish it, get the cover going, maybe submit it somewhere, maybe someone want to print it, and so on and so forth. So it's the who that's most important, in my opinion, that you need to start with if you're still uncertain about what to write about or whether anyone will actually want to get it.
One of the things that you said is really helpful is spend so much time knowing who your ideal reader is, who you're trying to attract, so that the title and conversation of the book alone will get them to say, "Ooh, that's my pain or problem. I need this help." So let's talk about what you did to get this book out of you. Did you transcribe it? Did you have someone write it for you? What was the method that you did to get this book out of you? And did you publish traditionally, self-publish? What was sort of your means of getting this book to the world?
Sure. So I've had 3 attempts. I had 3 goes at this book. The first one was I just decided to, hire someone who will get it out of me, and then they would sort of put it in the book. So this person, I won't mention any names. I'm still frustrated with them. But this person came recommended, and they said, okay, so I got this system. We have 10 interviews. We will figure out the outline of your book first, and we do the 10 interviews, for 10 chapters. Then when we're done, I'm going to take it to my editor. They're going to polish it up. We're going to come up with an e-cover or a cover, and we're going to publish it through Amazon self-publishing platform, which is, I think it's called KDP, right?
Right.
So I'm like, okay. And so I pay this guy 10 grand. And it takes them 8 months to conduct all the interviews with me. 8 months, can you believe it?
No.
True story, though. So 8 months to conduct all the interviews with me. And then they come back 2 weeks later, giving me literally word for word the transcript of what we've talked about on the interviews. No editing, no structure, nothing. Just literally just me blabbing for 10 hours on paper. I was so frustrated with them. I just cut that relationship immediately. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to write that book myself. And I sit down, and for the next month and a half, I devote about 90 minutes every single day from about 5:30 or 6 or so in the morning, till about 7 or 7:30. I sit down and I commit to writing 1,000 words a day. I really wanted to get that book out. And I do. I write 33,000 words. And this becomes this comprehensive how-to guide on how to start and grow your email marketing business, promoting either your own or other people's products. So I'm really proud of this piece. Right. I invested a lot. And, the quality of the content was amazing. The only thing that I didn't consider is that it kind of turned out to be this guide, this technical guide, rather than a book. Because at that moment, I realized that all the great books that started me out on a journey and a relationship with authors, at least the perceived relationship that I have with these authors, they weren't really technical, were they? They usually just rolled around one big idea, and then it was sprinkled with maybe 3 to 5 other ideas in the book, but there was never a very specific how to do this, don't do that implementation stuff in those books, because that's not really entertaining. So what I do is I turn this piece that I wrote for so long into a product, into like a product I sell, to like a premium report, and I just sell it, but not as a book, right? I just sell it to my audience, and I use it to generate new leads and kind of leave the whole idea of the book on the back burner for about a year.
Well, I really appreciate that you talked about that. Will you write more books? Was this a book that you enjoyed, or was this like, woof, I crossed that off my bucket list?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much. In fact, I'm very proud of releasing it. I'm still unsatisfied with what it is. meaning that I feel it could be richer, it could be bigger, it could be more entertaining, it could be more educational at the same time. But I had to commit to a deadline. Like, not because I had to, in terms of like, oh, I had a publisher who made me, but because I know that if you don't set a deadline, nothing gets done. So I committed to the version 1.0. This is something that I learned a long time ago when I got into the information marketing space. And that is, you can't really create a great product unless you commit to a crappy version 1.0. And, people like Bill Gates proved that you can be famous and make a lot of money, even if your product sucks, right? Because we had to endure like a good decade and a half of crappy Windows operating systems before it became anything decent and worthy of using. So as far as I'm concerned, this is my Windows 95. And so from here, I'm either going to expand on it and maybe just release an expanded version, or I may just write a totally different book with a different title. But this time, I know what the mistakes are that I've made in the first one. I know what the end result is supposed to look like now, and it'll be a completely different quality product for sure. When am I going to do it? Probably sometime later this year, because right now we are producing a bunch of new programs, so my time goes there. But as far as the book itself, it's the first one out of many, I'm sure.
Right. And you also have a podcast. I want to make sure we talk about that too, because it's another way to build an audience to pay attention who know, like, and trust you. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, why you created it, and how it kind of parlays into the message that you have in your book.
Yeah, sure. So the podcast is called The List Building Lifestyle Show, right? So it's kind of like the book. So the book is The List Building Lifestyle book, and the podcast is The List Building Lifestyle Show. And it was created a couple of years before the release of the book. Now, originally, the podcast wasn't created to get new customers, but rather to communicate with existing customers, because we had already a large customer base. And what we've noticed is that the people that we do best with, the people who are like the best customers, buy the most, behave well and enjoy our products, are typically podcast listeners. And that's why it was originally created. And so I went on for a while just being me on the podcast. Every episode was just pure Igor. But then I started inviting people that were like authorities and celebrities within our space, as well as some really famous authors. For example, I've hosted Robert Kiyosaki on the show. I've hosted Chris Voss of Never Split the Difference. Like a bunch of people, really, over the course of a few years. If you want to, you can go to listbuildinglifestyleshow.com and see on the right-hand side, there's a toolbar that kind of shows you a bunch of different names, including Mark Manson and Jeff Hoffman and a bunch of people. So that sort of became the theme, where I started inviting these like superstars to my podcast. And what ended up happening is that I almost accidentally started getting more credibility in the marketplace as a result of just hanging out and having media with all of these superstars. And so that was like the other added benefit to it.
I'm really grateful that you're here on the show. What other final words you have somebody who wants to get over this imposter syndrome you talked about and just get going?
As far as the people listening who are considering to write a book or wrote their manuscript and still haven't hit published or haven't sent it off to their publisher, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, the bad news is that it never goes away. I mean, I can honestly tell you that even today, having made millions of dollars online, having published a book, having accomplished a bunch of things in my life that most people don't accomplish in their lifetime, it doesn't go away. Now, so that's the sad part. The good part is it's the kind of thing that is just an illusion in our perception of the way the world works and the way the people are. But the reality is, if you hit publish, even if you've got a crappy book, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are going to love it. Chances are, when you publish your book, you are personally going to hate it, regardless of what the rest of the world is going to think about it. But to sum up, look, there's no way of overcoming it unless and until you hit the publish button. So if you have a message in you, publish it, regardless of whether you think it's a great message, a crappy message, a repetitive message, or not. It's not about that. It's about you making an impact for someone else who's waiting to read your book.
Thank you for listening to The List Building Lifestyle. Get access to the previous episodes, transcript of today's show, as well as other exclusive content at listbuildinglifestyleshow.com. Also remember to claim your free copy of my best-selling book at www.igorsbook.com. It explains how I made millions with list building starting from scratch. Plus, I'll give you $3,000 worth of free bonuses, including my best landing page templates, email swipe files, and traffic blueprints. Go to www.igorsbook.com now to claim your free package.